Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for me to share my unfiltered thoughts on Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin after having played through the campaign as well as having explored all the factions in competitive multiplayer. It will be no secret to any of you that as of the game's first month, it appears to be dead on arrival. This was reinforced in Frontier Development's business update, where the company stated that Realms of Ruin's sales did not match expectations and that their teams will refocus on the usual management genre that has been always Frontier's strength. This statement resulted in a nearly 20% drop of their stock price, and it also brought to light that the company will be making a net loss of £9 million this year, where the £20 million total cost to develop Realms of Ruin is clearly a huge contributor, even if that has been spread out over several years. The negative effects didn't end there, as the company has announced layoffs too, among a package of reduced spending, such as hiring freezes. These are the human consequences of failed products and the lack of understanding of audiences. They did indicate that support would continue, but how did we even get here? Let's start with the basics. The game has, at a fundamental level, a core gameplay loop similar to that of Dawn of War or the Company of Heroes series, except it's much simpler. You summon in your units from a portal and send them out on the map to capture resource points and victory points. Owning a majority of victory points will reduce the enemy's victory score, make them reach 0 and you win. On the resource points, you can build some buildings, which give you either more resource income or offer your units regeneration or deal damage to enemies. Other than the portal, you only own one building, the Muster Point. All it does is heal and replenish your squads and fire shots at enemies. But it also contains the tech level upgrades which unlock more units and increase the total amount of units you can field. Your units are mostly squads, but heroes and larger monsters are single entities in contrast. There's two resource types: Command and Realmstone. Command is generated by your resource points and serves as a core resource, while Realmstone is the tech resource that demands a dedicated structure to be built, but can also be gained by simply capturing points. There will be a handful of people that would say so far so good, not me. I think that even this style of real-time tactics game should feature a minimal amount of base building and deployables, even if we are talking about just a handful of freely placed structures. This would have allowed for a diversified tech tree of each faction in the game. I think there is much more that can be done for asymmetry than just making the units somewhat different in each roster. For example, certain buildings can exist exclusively for one faction. Think of something as crazy as giving Zinch buildable portals. Something like this can be balanced by giving the others something similarly significant, such as mud pools for the Orc, and generally imposing economic and maybe even numerical limits to such structures. In addition to this, you can make sure that the tech progression itself is not all about just upgrading master points. Maybe one faction can do that, but the others would have a different progression chain. Base building gives the player agency both in terms of strategy and the optics of the game. To me, the most important benefit is that it gives something to do when there's a lull in combat. Speaking of agency, which is literally the main fantasy for a strategy game to fulfill, this is where Realms of Ruin falls apart. You're supposed to have ultimate control over the battlefield in this kind of game. Unfortunately, once close to each other, opposing units will lock themselves into a melee. What this means is that you cannot give any orders to adjust, let's say, targeting a different enemy for a more favorable matchup, nor can you pull out of it. Even your ranged units will choose melee over listening to you. Even most of the abilities need to be used before melee lock starts. This leaves you with just one tool: full retreat back to base. In my view, in a real-time tactics game, it is imperative to have deep interactions between the units you can field, and actually have tactics playing a role. Realms of Ruin erodes this pillar to an unacceptable degree. Frontier is telling us that audiences don't care for strategy or tactics. They strip the genre down so much that we are left with a shell of it. I am absolutely convinced that this desire to simplify a complex genre with the objective of reaching a wider audience is deeply flawed. As I have suggested, the core loop of resource collection, base building, army training, positioning, ability usage, and micromanagement are precisely what the audience loves about this kind of game, and Frontier has decided to alienate the existing audience in search of one that doesn't exist. Let this be a lesson for any future developer looking to enter the strategy genre. I repeat for absolute clarity, No one wants to play overly simplistic, slow-paced strategy games. There is no audience for that, not even via consoles. Would you make an FPS game that removes half the features that are standard across the genre, in the hope that non-FPS players will suddenly be interested? Of course not, that would be completely backwards. Or making a strategy game, you're going to want to capture the core audiences through demonstrating excellence and delivering on expectations. This includes depth and player agency at the forefront. You can solve the console user experience on the side. Even the Warhammer brand can't carry such a failure of core gameplay design as Realms of Ruin. From my understanding, the devs wanted to be as true to the tabletop as possible, but as we have all swiftly figured out, they haven't made a tabletop game, but a real-time one, which needs to stand on its own legs. With that said, I don't want to deny that to some degree I enjoyed playing this game. It has bones, such as the highly asymmetric factions and some light elements of strategy to it for sure, along with some cool moment-to-moment elements via the more flashy abilities. With the concurrent player base only being able to hit triple digits during peaks, and members of the official Discord having to arrange games within weeks of launch, it is fair to say that multiplayer is toast already. The hefty emergency sales at up to 45% off are surely boosting the numbers, but clearly this isn't hitting the mark either. The population scale likely has to do with pricing, as many have pointed out in comments on my videos. Frontier decided to charge full AAA pricing, so $60, and followed up with DLC for skirmish and multiplayer, of which we are likely to see more. These include only one single hero per DLC, which optionally replaces your existing base game hero, so they do not enrich your game-to-game roster. Rather, they just serve in a similar role as the stuff you already have, for $5 each. Frontier is having a laugh. Arguably, the campaign was of decent quality, but it was extremely short, only dragging on in my playthrough due to insane levels of cheating on the highest difficulty. In the end, nothing groundbreaking happened during the campaign, one of the factions wasn't playable at all, and another had only a minimal presence. So, what is the product actually worth, and what would I do to turn things around? I would recommend a base price of no more than $40 for this to be a fair deal. Honestly, I would rather lean towards $30, as I'm sure many would agree, and be more willing to dive in. Premium products require a large target audience so that their high price points actually generate positive revenue. The emergency sales already point towards Frontier's regret when it comes to pricing out their own customers. I would also recommend the currently released hero DLC to be made free, and to refund all DLC owners. A single hero as DLC has to be a meme. Frontier needs to wake up. They are targeting an audience that is already jaded with much better DLC offerings, as seen with the Total War Warhammer series. When the DLC is done right, however, meaning that it brings significant changes and new content, people eat it up. Learn from this, and work on significant, fairly priced DLC. Multiplayer and skirmish needs to be free, with Frontier having created an ecosystem that relies on people buying units and creating user-generated content such as maps, as well as obviously matchmaking relying on the raw number of concurrent players. This is the quickest, most meaningful injection they can give the game, reducing barriers of entry to nearly nothing. The combat lock needs to go. Units should respond to commands, and range units should not rush into melee just because something is brushing past while aiming for another target. It is totally fine to restrict certain abilities like charge while in melee though. Some form of light base building needs to be added. The game doesn't need to be Age of Empires, but just a little bit of content on this front could put things on par with Company of Heroes or the Dawn of War series. A replay system needs to be added. With this, content creators like myself will be better able to cover matches submitted by viewers, including coverage of tournament matches after the fact. Replays are also super useful for bug tracking and reproduction in the development environment. It's a huge failure if Frontier doesn't already have a rudimentary system for this internally. I want to point out that all of this is extremely risky for business. The hype is gone. The negative reviews have stacked up. If Frontier's leadership is feeling adventurous and wants to recover the game, they'll need a lot of luck and find a way to generate goodwill beyond just implementing recommendations like mine, and whatever else they gather from the community. It would be perfectly understandable at this point to just write off the losses against the company's taxes and move on to greener pastures. That said, all of this technology they created is there, and ready to be used. Perhaps they can fix things up in the next few months and then start working on either sequels or similar games with other franchises. Maybe even start their own IP. But as I am having these thoughts, putting on my investor hat, every moment they spend on hopeless ventures is a moment that they could have been productive in building a lucrative product. I believe that Realms of Ruin is 80% of the way to being a hopeless venture. Everything I wanted to say has been said except for one thing, my final verdict. I will give Realms of Ruin a 6 out of 10, and feel generous in doing so. It lacks almost everything on the gameplay front, but makes up for it at least somewhat with nice visuals and an above average story presented with good production value cinematics. Even with all that taken into account, the game just doesn't stand out, and you are better off spending your money on other strategy games with a fantasy setting, such as the Total War Warhammer series or Spellforce 3, especially on deep discounts. I will not be covering Realms of Ruin going forward if there are no major changes, but I would love to see Frontier giving both this game and the strategy genre at least another shot. If they do, I will be here for it. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave your thoughts on the game and what you would like to see changed and added. See you in the comment section.